So next one is the creepy photos with disturbing backstories.
In this episode, I'll be deep diving into a handful of disturbing.
Let's go. Okay. The Big Bad Wolf.
It was Halloween night, 1984, and 31-year-old Doreen Herbert was cuddled up on the sofa at her 2792 Guildhall Drive home in San Jose, watching a tame horror movie with her husband, Charles, and her daughter, Deanna. Deanna was almost 5 years old at that point, and had been enjoying the magic of her first proper Halloween. Charles had already taken her trick-or-treating around the neighborhood.
What movie are they watching is the question.
The driveway with jack-o'-lanterns, signaling to the local kids that their house was a safe bet to score some sweets. Despite being 8 months pregnant, Doreen was up and down half the evening, answering the front door and handing out candy to the little nightmare creatures that came a-knocking.
Nightmare
It truly
creatures.
was a happy Halloween. Like their daughter, Doreen and Charles were also in high spirits, excited to be welcoming another child into the world and to be putting some personal losses behind them. Not only had Doreen's sister died in a house fire in 1980, but around that same time, she had lost her first child from a previous marriage. It had been a rough few years, but finally, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. As the night wore on, Charles told Doreen that he was running to the store to grab a bottle of wine, and that he'd be back in about 15 minutes. He set off out the front door, leaving Doreen and Deanna alone at the house.
Oh boy.
Shortly thereafter, there came a loud banging on the front door. It was approximately 9 p.m. at that point, a little too late for trick-or-treaters, Doreen thought. However,
Really?
being overtaken by the excitement of her first Halloween night, Deanna begged her mother to open the door so that she could see the other children's costumes. Doreen slowly lifted herself off the couch and made her way through the hallway, Deanna sticking close to her side. They unlocked the door together with a happy Halloween, expecting to see a handful of little terrors dressed in bedsheets and Dracula.
I'm guessing when it was coming, I was gonna say, like, I wonder how much the crime increase is during Halloweens in different countries. As obviously, you know, it is much easier to do a crime while being masked because people expect you to be masked. So I wonder if like there's massive increase or it's not actually that common
masks.
because there's too many people
Their smiles
outside.
faded when they noticed the lone figure standing on their porch. It wasn't a child, but rather a fully grown man dressed in boots, work overalls, and a rubber wolf mask with matching rubber gloves. A look of realization flashed across Doreen's face, and she sternly told the visitor to leave. But from behind his wolf mask, the man simply replied, "I'm going to kill you," and revealed a machete that he had been hiding behind his back.
Well, shit.
Doreen yelled for Deanna to run and hide. Heart racing, the youngster scrambled back into the living room, squeezed herself behind the sofa, and covered herself with a blanket. She remained still as the sound of screams and thuds from the hallway were replaced by an eerie silence. Peeking out from under her blanket, she watched as the masked man made his way inside and past the couch. He searched the room, aware someone else was home, but thankfully didn't notice her. "If you say anything," he shouted, "I'll come back and kill you too." The masked figure then fled the house and disappeared into the night. Several minutes later, Charles returned from the store and found his wife Doreen lying in a pool of blood in the hallway, and his daughter Deanna hiding behind the sofa. He immediately called emergency services.
Man, that's fucked up.
Paramedics arrived quickly, and though Doreen was still breathing, the prognosis was bleak. Her left hand had been severed and dropped by her attacker in the living room, and she had gouges to the head and face that reached the brain. But most disturbingly, the wolfman had targeted her abdomen. As one responder put it, she'd been flayed open like a gutted deer, and her unborn son was found placed under a stool with a jack-o'-lantern atop it, as if the pumpkin was
What the
smiling over the
fuck?
baby. Officers arrived while medics were working on Doreen and found Charles covered in blood and tears.
I hope you don't tell me that this is a mystery, right? That the guy wasn't fine or something. This does sound like the kind of madness that you would see in an horror movie. This whole thing of taking out the unborn child and putting it under some Halloween stuff. So maybe the guy was inspired by some movie.
Clutching tightly to his daughter. When they tried to pry Deanna from his arms, he flew into a panic-stricken and uncontrollable state. They placed him in a patrol car for his own safety, but he proceeded to try and break free, kicking and smashing his head against the window to get back to his family. Meanwhile, other investigators found an object on the front porch. A discarded, cartoonish wolf mask with bulbous eyes and a wagging tongue.
Okay.
Doreen would, unfortunately, succumb to her wounds while en route to the hospital, and Charles, who was immediately considered the prime suspect, was taken to the local police headquarters for questioning. After all, Doreen's murder had taken place in the brief window of time that he had left for the store, and he had reportedly returned mere moments after the wolfman had fled the scene.
Don't tell me it's
The
actually
timing
him.
was suspicious. However, after chatting with Doreen's neighbors and loved ones, it soon became clear that there was another potential suspect. Her bitter ex-husband, William Michael Dennis, known to most simply as Mike.
Fucking hell.
Doreen and Mike had been married in 1975. By 76, they had a son together, Paul. Mike, who was typically a glum and moody character, doted over Paul and was determined to give him a better childhood than he had had. However, his focus on Paul reportedly led to his neglect of Doreen, whom he kept at home, isolated from her social circle. Their marriage inevitably broke down as a result, and the couple agreed to separate. Although Doreen gained full custody of Paul, she was always civil towards Mike, and welcomed him in for visits whenever he pleased.
Is it revenge because this kid died, right?
Hoping to win Doreen back, Mike moved into a house 6 blocks away. Though he kept up a cheerful front, inside, Mike resented how happy Doreen appeared after their divorce. He had always been socially awkward and found it difficult to form relationships, while she was busy reconnecting with old pals and going to events. Mike's resentment only grew when Doreen met and fell in love with Charles, a successful, well-adjusted and happy-go-lucky guy who ran his own business and who served as an amazing role model for young Paul. When Tiana was born, it became all too clear to Mike that Doreen had well and truly moved on, but he still regularly went over to play with Paul and take him on outings, fearful that he was being replaced by Charles. However, in 1980, tragedy struck when 4-year-old Paul drowned in a pool behind Doreen and Charles's home.
I see.
While outside playing in the garden, the boy had snuck out of eyeshot for a few short minutes, and in that time dug a hole in the barrier surrounding the pool. Though an unfortunate accident, Mike blamed Doreen for the loss of their son, wrongly believing that she had intentionally drowned Paul so that he would stop visiting. He even brought a wrongful death lawsuit against her, but the court ruled in her favor, determining that she had taken precautions to wall off.
And then obviously he sees that, a year later she's having another kid and clearly like she's moved on from this too and he goes mad. I mean, doesn't justify any of it, but at least there's a logical backstory that what led to this. Logical, I mean. There's no logical reason to kill her, but
the pool, and that the accident was just
you know what I mean.
one of those unfortunate things. Though heartbroken, Doreen and Charles went on as best they could, putting on a brave face as they raised Deanna, determined that the incident shouldn't deprive her of a normal and happy upbringing. Meanwhile, Mike stewed in his anger. Seeing his ex smile after all that had happened made his dark thoughts fester, and when news reached him that she was now pregnant with another son, those who knew him say he was consumed by rage. Which brings us back to that fateful night in 1984. 2.5 hours before the attack, several residents of Guildhall Drive had noticed a man wearing a wolf mask staring at the Herbert residence from across the street, holding a grocery bag with a heavy object inside. Those who had seen him suspected it could be Mike Dennis. Deanna
but how
also
did they know
believed
that?
She had heard her mother shout out the name Michael just before the intruder butchered her. Detectives decided to pay Mike a visit at 12:20 a.m. on November 1st. They could hear the distinct sound of running water coming from inside, and, fearing that Mike may be trying to wash away evidence, banged on the door several times. Eventually, they had dispatch call his number. That's when Mike answered the door in a calm and collected fashion, wearing only a dressing gown. Officers couldn't help but notice a large, fresh cut on his right hand. He explained this away, saying that he'd been pumpkin carving. The news of his ex-wife's slaying barely registered on Mike's face, and he casually invited the investigators inside to chat further.
Alright.
Mike, followed by one officer, entered his bedroom to dig out his ID. That same officer noticed how Mike's eyes kept darting towards the headboard of his bed, and how he was slowly inching closer towards it. Suspicious, the officer ordered Mike to freeze as he checked behind it. There, he found a holster containing a loaded magnum.
Oh shit.
Mike was promptly taken into custody. Charles was eventually cleared of suspicion when a clerk recalled seeing him at the store on the night of his wife's death. Video surveillance confirmed his presence there at the time of Doreen's slaying.
Poor guy and poor kid, huh?
But to build a case against their prime suspect, Mike, detectives needed more evidence. Investigators found a little black book in Mike's possession at the time of his arrest and contacted his acquaintances and romantic partners. One woman revealed that she had attended a Halloween party with Mike the previous year, a party where he dressed as the big, bad wolf. This photo, taken at that same house party,
That is the
shows
fucking
Mike
mask.
wearing the exact same mask as the one found at the crime scene. Further searches of Mike's home uncovered the clothes that he wore in the photo, as well as packaging for an 18-inch machete believed to be the murder weapon, and 2 handmade, lockable coffins in the basement, which investigators believe he had prepared for Doreen and Charles. Alongside the caskets were 2 hand-stitched body bags and 2 anchors. Forensic analysis confirmed that Mike's blood had been left at the scene, while Doreen's was found in his home and vehicle. Several witnesses came forward claiming to have seen Mike fleeing the scene, but given that it was Halloween, assumed he was covered in fake blood. With a mountain of evidence against him, Mike was charged with murder just days after the brutal crime. Mike initially denied involvement, but after prosecutors presented their evidence at trial, he admitted he had taken Doreen's life, but changed his plea to not guilty by reason of insanity. His attorneys argued that the loss of his son Paul had driven him mad, and seeing children trick-or-treating on Halloween had triggered him. He admitted his original plan was to...
It's always the same, like I feel like almost every murder case, even though I don't follow it, they try this, at least in the US, I don't know, in other countries, they always do that. Like, they always try the I'm insane, rather than like, and in a sense, you know, like, us who haven't killed people like that, you know, I look at anyone who killed someone like that in cold blood as insane, you know? But technically, he isn't, because he knew what he was doing. Like, this was clear, premeditated revenge, right? Insane is only, like, really when someone is considered that they can't do, like, even take care of themselves in daily life. And so the murder was more like a momentary act of madness.
Locked Doreen and Charles inside his handmade caskets, weigh them down with the anchors, and toss them into the ocean from his boat. That way, they'd know how Paul felt when he drowned.
That's premeditated, no?
However, he opted for the easier method of waiting for Charles to leave the house and striking during the 15-minute window that Doreen was most vulnerable. He claimed he was unaware that Doreen was pregnant and that he never would have followed through with the slaying had he known. But I mean, look at these pictures of Doreen that were taken just before the incident.
And didn't they say that he pulled out the... Yeah.
Come on, dude. In 1988, the jury rejected his insanity defense and convicted Mike of first-degree murder for Doreen's death and second-degree for the
lesser
death
punishment.
of her unborn son. He was originally given the death penalty, but that's...
But yeah, I guess I understand, like, lawyers and all that, they always make you try that because who knows, it might work. But at the same time, I feel like because it's always tried, it seems like every single case it's tried. I feel like judge and juries, they must be so used to it that on the other hand, it has the opposite effect of like, everybody knows that criminals always try that. And so you probably are like even less inclined to think that they're insane. You know, I don't know. So it feels like counterproductive to always try that. Yeah.
Sentence was commuted to life in prison in October 2024. Charles and Deanna have since stated that they've forgiven Mike, if only for their own peace of mind. However,
Strong people.
in Deanna's words, I can forgive, but I can't forget, and I do think he should get the death penalty. I had to grow up without a mum and a brother. Speaking about Doreen, Deanna and Charles told the media, when she smiled and laughed, you couldn't help
Innocent
but
until
love her.
proven guilty.
She was always giving.
Fucking sad. All I can say. I mean, yeah, imagine that girl. She was 5, but every Halloween, I feel like, or every time someone rings the door at night, she's going to be having some kind of PTSD from that. I can only imagine. I mean, even me, who's never had like someone ring the door and then try to kill me, I'm like always kind of scared when people ring the door and I'm not expecting anyone. So I can only imagine the kind of like PTSD that you get every time someone rings the door at night. Yeah. Tragic. Rest in peace. Really sad. Aconcagua.
Mount Aconcagua. Standing at almost 23,000 feet, it's the highest mountain in the Western Hemisphere, and one of the most dangerous. Those who brave this Argentinian Goliath occasionally stumble upon items that have remained nestled in the snow for months, years, and in some cases, decades. Be that some discarded packaging, old climbing equipment, or even a body.
Everest is like that too.
53 people unknown to have perished while ascending Aconcagua over the years. Among them, number 26, John Cooper, and number 27, Janet Johnson, both experienced mountaineers who attempted to reach the summit 52 years ago. Unfortunately, they'd never make it back alive. Even stranger, lead investigators believe they may not have succumbed to the elements or an accidental fall, but rather met their end at the hands of their fellow climbers.
Really?
It was January 1973, and a disparate band of mostly amateur climbers from the US had come together to conquer Mount Aconcagua. Their leader, a lawyer named Carmi Defoe, was the one to organize the expedition, and formed a team consisting of Mazamas Climbing Club members Jim Petrosky, Bill Eubank,
39, 45,
Macmillan,
6,
Bill Zeller, and John Shelton. The second to last member to join the team was John Cooper, a highly intelligent NASA engineer who had helped put men on the moon. Last to sign up was Janet Johnson, a quiet and reclusive school librarian from Denver who was easily the most experienced climber in the group. Whereas most other members were described as weekend hikers, Janet had scaled some of the highest peaks in the world, and did so regularly.
I think also the problem is that half of the team is over 40, and I mean, if this is like such a crazy high-level mountain, isn't that stupid? Because you need like crazy amount of stamina, strength, and all that, right?
Their guide was to be Miguel Alfonso, a local who had reached the summit 5 times, and who really should have been allowed to lead the team. But Carmi was determined to have that honor. The team reached base camp on January 21st, and met with the manager, Roberto Bustos. He and Miguel quickly realized that they were dealing with an unprepared group of strangers who had no allegiance to one another, and, as one news outlet put it, an every man for himself attitude. Indeed, a reporter covering the story of their climb decided to take a picture of each member before their attempt, as, in his words, he didn't think they'd all be coming back.
Okay.
As expected, things started poorly, with the members bickering amongst themselves about hiking speeds and targets. Still, they all made it to Camp 1, navigating their way through icy stalagmites and rugged terrain.
That looks kind of fun, actually.
The party became more and more fragmented, both figuratively and literally, splitting off into 2 different groups. 3 of them stayed behind at Camp 1, having become disoriented and irrational, while the rest of the crew struggled on to establish Camp 2 at 18,000 feet, and then Camp 3 at 20,000. That's where they sheltered for the night. By breakfast, one member, Jim Petrosky, began showing signs of high-altitude cerebral edema, a swelling of the brain. As such, their guide Miguel...
I really feel like I've watched this video before, but it's just that I've seen like a couple videos like this about Everest, I guess, and maybe other mountains like K1, right? It seems to be a story that has repeated so many times. Almost the same kind of setup. You know, there's always some inexperienced one. There's always like people going kind of crazy or not having the stamina. Some having to stay at like one camp down because they just can't go further. Some being like, I don't care, I'll go further. An inexperienced guide. It's almost the same story every time.
Escorted him back down the mountain. Now out in front were Janet and John, along with police officer Bill Zeller and dairy farmer Arnold Macmillan. The 4 of them didn't know the mountain and barely knew each other, but thankfully, weather conditions looked good for that day, and so they soldiered on, making it to 21,000 feet and reaching a sheet of ice called the Polish Glacier. But at that point, sudden bad weather and darkness forced them to set up a makeshift camp. Using their ice axes, the 4 desperados carved a shallow shelter into the glacier. They spread space blankets to cover the icy ground, their only barrier against the cold in the absence of their tents or sleeping bags, which they had left with most of their other equipment at Camp 3. Cramped and uncomfortable, Janet and Bill eventually moved outside, sitting together as they shivered in the freezing cold. Their sole mission now was to survive until dawn. By morning, John Cooper was found partially buried beneath a blanket of snow. Shivering and utterly drained, John announced that he was heading back to Camp 3. His life was more valuable than glory. Either due to hubris, ignorance, apathy, or oxygen deprivation, his 3 co-climbers decided to let him go it alone. They
that's not smart.
chose to continue on, ascending the Polish glacier and making it to a ridge that led to the summit. But as darkness fell once again, both Bill and Arnold apparently turned to see that Janet had disappeared. Because they had climbed the glacier unroped, the 3 weren't connected, and there was no telling at which point they had lost her. Bill and Arnold would eventually make it back to base camp, where they met up with the rest of their party, all having given up reaching the summit. But 2 of their group were still unaccounted for. John Cooper.
I just don't understand. Like, I'm totally fine with people who do stuff like this, like, it's your choice to do this kind of stuff where you have such a high chance of dying, right? Like, I don't really mind, people who do extreme sports or extreme activities like this, it's your choice. But, looking at this, it's almost like they wanted to die. Like, even if you're inexperienced, it should come with like logic that this is a place where at this point it's probably like already known that a ton of people have died. So you should like really prepare, and that, going alone and doing this and that is bad. I don't know. I guess some people just don't care. Like, I would never do something like this. But if I was to do something like this, that's known to be super dangerous, I would do like a lot of like research in advance to know like the thing to do and not to do. And it seems to do everything that like, even without being a mountain climber, seems like stupid, right? So, I don't know. It's almost like they went there wanting to die.
And Janet Johnson. Immediately, the authorities were called. Bill and Arnold had been the last to see the 2 missing climbers alive, and both men provided detailed accounts to the police, though strangely, their stories differed quite dramatically. According to Arnold, once Janet disappeared on the Polish glacier, they began calling out her name. Eventually, she called back, and they found her sitting in the snow, mumbling to herself and acting delirious. "Don't make me suffer," she allegedly told them. "Just let me sit here and die." Bill then roped himself to Johnson, while Arnold instead recalled Bill taking her by the arm. Bill stated the 3 of them became disoriented and spent another night together on the mountain, while Arnold asserted that he went ahead of the other 2 and camped alone. They claimed to have fired off a flare gun, which nobody saw or heard. When the weather let up, Arnold attempted to make his way down the mountain solo to get help, when he stumbled upon what he thought was a dead soldier. But that was a hallucination. What he had really found was John's body.
Oh.
According to Arnold, John was sitting with his head in his hands and frozen, completely solid. Arnold made it back to Camp 3 and decided to rest before continuing on to base camp. Meanwhile, Bill and Janet stumbled down at a far slower pace, at one point taking a serious tumble. They too passed John's remains and knew they must be close to Camp 3. That's when Bill alleges that he went on ahead, leaving Janet to make her own way down, believing her to now be in a good condition. A few hours later, Bill made it back to Camp 3, where he rendezvoused with Arnold. The 2 disoriented men slept through the night, but by daybreak, there was still no sign of Janet. Exhausted, they decided to stumble back to base camp.
Like, in my mind, I don't know if I would say any of this is murder, except there's more coming. It's more like, again, they were all kind of only here for themselves. So if they see someone struggling and going to die, they're not here to help them, is probably what they are thinking. That's what I'm getting. So I don't know if it counts as murder.
Without her. Both Bill and Arnold explained the discrepancies in their story away by saying they'd been physically and psychologically drained and suffering from altitude sickness.
I can't believe that.
They, along with their other survivors, immediately returned to their hotel and caught a flight back to America without talking to reporters, saying goodbye to their camp manager and guide, or waiting for confirmation on what became of their 2 missing comrades.
That sounds like running away.
Their flight home, a reporter approached them on the tarmac and asked them to clarify what happened on the mountain, but the lawyer leader, Kami, blocked him. When the group made it back to the States, Kami held a top-secret meeting at his law office, where the group typed up and published their official expedition report, painting both John and Janet as fanatics, desperate to reach the summit at all costs, and saying they died from pulmonary edema, an assertion that would soon be disproven.
Okay, so I'm wrong.
Later that same year, Miguel led a 4-man team to search for the 2 missing climbers. As expected, when they reached the Polish glacier, they discovered some of the explorers' belongings. A little further down, they came upon John Cooper's frozen body, about 150 meters from Camp 3. The condition in which they found him was suspicious to say the least. Unlike Arnold's account, he wasn't found sitting upright, but was instead lying outstretched. He wore only one crampon, a critical traction device for navigating the icy slopes. His ice axe was missing, and his hands were bare, with the gloves nowhere to be found. The slope where he was discovered was gentle, not the type of terrain where an experienced climber might struggle or fall. Most bizarre was a deep, bloody, cylindrical hole in John's abdomen that reached his spine, and the fact that his face was frozen in an expression of terror.
Okay.
The survivors rationalized the discovery, saying that John must have fallen on his ice axe, stumbled down the mountain, and then died. John's body was recovered and brought in for an autopsy. The complete findings of the postmortem were sealed from public access, but it was revealed that he had sustained skull and brain injuries, which were listed as the official cause of death, not pulmonary edema or exposure as one might expect. He had no broken bones, indicating he hadn't taken a major fall either. More suspicious was the fact that his abdomen wound was perfectly round and not very wide. The report noted that it looked less like he had fallen on an ice axe and more like someone had stabbed him with an ice screw.
Stabbed him. Oh, okay.
Over a year passed before Janet's body was discovered, very close to where John's had been found. A trio of experienced climbers stumbled upon her by chance and immediately recognized some unsettling and suspicious details. Janet's body was found face up.
Why were they killed is my question though.
The skin having degloved over time. She was wearing only one crampon, and her climbing ropes were wrapped around her body. Like John Cooper, she too was missing her ice axe and gloves. A rock was resting atop her body, which was in an otherwise empty field of ice. According to those that found her, it looked as if someone had set up the scene to make it look like she had had an accidental fall, when really she had fallen victim to foul play. The coroner in Mendoza agreed, and once again documented the cause of death as injuries to the skull and brain. In the assistant medical examiner's words, they were killed, no doubt
Seems
about
like it, yeah.
Needless
But why?
to say, the authorities began to seriously question whether they were dealing with homicides, and the Argentinian press had a field day speculating about possible motives for murder, ranging from a heated disagreement to altitude-induced hallucinations to simply John and Janet slowing the others down. Still, with no concrete evidence to work with, no charges could be pursued, and when Argentina fell victim to a military coup in 1976, the case froze over entirely.
I see.
That is,
Unlucky.
until 2020, almost 50 years after
That
the
long.
incident, when 2 climbers scaling the Polish glacier made an extraordinary find. Nestled in the snow was an almost perfectly preserved Nickel
I forgot this is about pictures, right? I forgot.
camera with the name Janet Johnson embossed on the holster. And amazingly, technicians in Canada were able to develop the film. The camera contained 24 photos, each offering a glimpse into Janet's final hours.
Alright.
She captured images of her fellow climbers and the serene, snow-covered landscape surrounding them. One photo, taken by one of her party, shows Janet smiling with her ice axe in hand. This is the last photo of Janet ever taken.
Oh, so the photo doesn't reveal
The
more.
photos suggest that she continued taking pictures after John had turned back, all of them well composed. So if she were suffering from altitude sickness, it didn't show in her camera work. One of the last images was taken on the Polish glacier itself, and shows one climber ahead of Janet, probably Bill Zeller. Both Bill and Arnold said that they had climbed the Polish glacier unroped, hence how they were able to lose Janet in the
But
first
there's a
place.
rope.
But this image proves otherwise, clearly showing that she was roped up to her fellow climbers. What happened after this image was taken remains a mystery.
So the guy never confessed, they were never
Valuable piece of
arrested.
evidence, the camera provided no concrete answers, but it
Yeah.
did serve to reignite interest in Janet and John's case. And 5 decades after their deaths, had people questioning once again whether they were victims of unfortunate accidents or something more sinister.
So there's no
The
justice
condition of
though.
their bodies is hard to overlook, but it is conceivable that the pair, frozen and confused, were killed by Akongakwa herself and not their fellow party members. But even if that is the case, should Bill and Arnold still be held responsible for leaving them to fend for themselves? Or, when up in those cold and lonesome heights, with a team who knew the risks, is it fair enough to look out only for oneself? As the base camp manager, Roberto Bustos, told the New York Times, "It's a different world at 6,000 meters, with different laws and rules. And the behavior. You go down to 5,000 meters and think these people are crazy." All the other climbers are now gone, having passed in accidents or from old age.
Great.
But today, 52 years later, the mystery of what happened on Akongakwa still lives on, and likely will forever.
I mean, I don't know. Clearly, it's still like leaving this very open, right? The only sus thing is the stab wound. That's kind of like an ice pick. That sounds pretty weird, but it's also not crazy to think that, again, if they were lost, like it's someone trying to kill themselves, they stab themselves, and that could also be a possibility. I don't know. The other weird thing is the first coroner report or whatever, they said it was still sealed or like it wasn't fully released. That sounds weird too. I don't know what to think. I mean, it's a bit too open, this one, so it's hard to tell. So maybe I shouldn't blame the others, right? Like, they keep saying it's a team, but was it really a team? Like, in a sense, I feel like it's more like all those people were there following the guide. But no one felt like it's a team and that they really care about the others, right? So, I don't know. Can you blame someone for not trying to help someone else when they might put themselves in danger? All these questions are pretty interesting, but I feel like we just don't know enough about the case. Yeah, that's my take. Interesting one though. Big mystery. It's a shame that the pictures don't reveal more, because it reminds me a bit of the case of George Malloy. Implement has a great video about it. It's the Everest discrepancy. I think it's about like who is the first one to have climbed it or something. And then one of the guy who died there and disappeared was eventually found like much more recently, and they found some potential proof or something that cleared some things up. I forget the details, but it's pretty interesting. Very interesting. Patricia Mian.
On April 20th, 1989, at around 8:15 p.m., a woman named Peggy Bueller was driving along a remote stretch of Montana Highway 200 with her father when she noticed a car approaching on the wrong side of the road, heading directly towards them. She swerved to avoid a head-on collision and made it out of the way just in time. The car behind her, driven by off-duty police dispatcher Carol Heights, wasn't as fortunate.
Oof.
The two vehicles collided, though Officer Heights thankfully emerged from the wreckage, dazed but unscathed. From the offending vehicle emerged a blonde woman who walked into the middle of the road and, according to Heights, just stood there, wide-eyed and silent, staring as if looking right through her. The blonde woman then proceeded to climb a fence and freeze momentarily to survey the crash site. Peggy, who was still in her car, stated, "As I looked out across the accident, I noticed someone on the other side of the fence. She was standing there like a spectator, not like it had happened to her." The blonde woman
Shocked?
silently walked off through the empty field and disappeared into the vast, endless darkness.
That's still pretty scary.
30 minutes later, after running her plates, That blonde woman was identified as 38-year-old Patricia Meehan. Originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Patricia had attended college in preparation for a career in childcare, but ended up moving to Bozeman, Montana in 1985 to work as a ranch hand, driven by her love of animals. To support herself, she also worked several other jobs around town, and now she was gone. The authorities were unsure whether she had fled the scene of the crash because she was hiding from them, or because she had sustained a head injury, though according to her landlord, Patricia had been acting unusually hyper and out of character the day before the collision. Indeed, that same day, Patricia had spoken with her father over the phone, expressing feelings of stress and a desire to return home to Pittsburgh. She did seem to be traveling in that general direction when she crashed, albeit still 1,500 miles away. In the immediate aftermath
US
of
are pretty big.
police discovered footprints in a remote field, roughly 3/4 of a mile from the crash site. The prints matched Patricia's footwear and size. Investigators followed the trail until the early hours of April 21st, when the footprints vanished into the rugged terrain, prompting them to suspend their search until daylight. Patricia's family traveled to Montana soon thereafter and distributed 2,000 missing person flyers throughout the area. Local volunteers combed the surrounding mountains, while helicopters scoured the area from above, all to no avail. Searches of abandoned coal mines in the vicinity yielded no signs of Patricia. The crash site, located nearly 400 miles from her home in Bozeman, also puzzled both law enforcement and her family, as nobody could explain why she had traveled so close to Circle. Initially, police theorized that Patricia may have left the scene by hitchhiking or by hiding on a hay truck. However,
Maybe
sightings were reported to corroborate either theory. Among Patricia's belongings, her family found an undeveloped roll of film, which included a self-portrait taken in front of a mirror. One that shows Patricia staring blankly with vacant eyes. It's believed to be the last photo of her ever taken. To this day, the 38-year-old has never been found.
There's no more info than that.
While some believe that Patricia did hitchhike her way back to civilization and was forever silenced by an opportunistic killer, others think it's far more likely that she wandered deep into the wilderness and succumbed to the elements or a predatory animal.
Yeah.
A third possibility is that she's still out there somewhere, alive and living under an alias, having never contacted any of her family or friends to let them know that she was okay. Since her disappearance in 1989, there have been over 5,000 reported sightings of Patricia, mostly at truck stops in Montana, Washington State, and South Dakota. In one alleged sighting, she was seen accompanied by a man, and in another, talking to herself and crying. Patricia's own parents would go on to verify some of those sightings after viewing photographs and video footage which supposedly showed her. Several diner waitresses have reported seeing an identical, spaced-out woman drinking coffee at their restaurants for hours on end. Given the
And yet she was never caught.
sightings, it's possible that Patricia is still out there somewhere, suffering from a rare form of amnesia, a theory some psychiatrists strongly suspect. On August 30th, 1990, police in Idaho arrested a transient woman going by the name Morning Star for littering. Kurt Fletcher, Patricia's ex-boyfriend, commented that Morning Star bore a striking resemblance to her and even had a similar voice.
Kind of.
It's speculated that this woman may have been mistaken for Patricia in previous sightings. Unfortunately, Patricia's parents have since passed away without ever knowing what became of their daughter.
That's sad.
At present, there are over 14,000 unidentified decedents in the US, anonymous bodies who nobody can put a name to. I can't help but wonder whether Patricia is among them.
Yeah. Man, what a weird story, right? I mean, like, you know, it clearly seems to be that she was going a bit crazy, like even the landlord was saying that she seemed weird recently. And I mean, she was driving on the other side of the road, so yeah. At first I was thinking, like she crashed into a cop and she realized, shit, that's really bad. So she tried to run, but no. From the beginning she was driving on the other side of the road, not especially toward the cop. And like the whole description of the scene, like she just stands there on the road, then she climbs over the fence and look at the scene like a spectator and then just disappears. It sounds kind of terrifying. Yeah, really someone not really well in the head. And I'm sure like a massive crash doesn't help. Okay. I feel like for the cop or for the other like woman who escaped the crash, that's the kind of story that will haunt you, you know? Like, especially that there's no answer, right? There's no, like, this is unsolved. That will haunt you. That's really terrifying. Yeah, I don't have much theories. I mean, I'm just assuming she was crazy, not well, and either she disappeared in the wilderness and died, or she disappeared into the US and lives, but like, yeah, who knows?